Are you in the market for a spacious family SUV, an EV and a hot hatch? Well, the Skoda Enyaq vRS might be the car for you. I'm AJ, you're watching Autogefuehl, and today we're going to take a closer look at this. The front of the Enyaq vRS definitely stands out, and that's because of three main things. First of all, you have the Skoda crystal headlights, which look really gorgeous. The VRS also comes with matrix LED lights as standard. And by the way, it's the VRS in a lot of markets, but in some markets it's just called the RS. I'm more used to calling it the VRS, so we'll stick with that for today. The second important element is this illuminated front grille, also highlighting that crystalline structure. Really gorgeous at night. It really makes the front of the car pop. And finally, you have the VRS specific design elements in the lower part of the bumper to give it that very masculine, strong, athletic appearance. And what about this Mamba green color? Do you like it? Put it down in the comments below. The Skoda Enyaq RS is on the same MEB platform as the standard Enyaq and as well as the Coupe version. So it's about 4.6 meters long. This being the VRS, it sits on lowered sport suspension, but you can also get the dynamic chassis control, the DCC, as an option. And to widen the spectrum of functionality of a car such as this, I would always recommend just get that DCC as well. This is four-wheel drive, so you have an electric motor in the front and an electric motor at the rear. The electric motor at the rear is a little bit more powerful, therefore you can kind of call this a more rear-biased platform. Mamba green color again, so really striking here in the side profile, along with that similar color accent on these 21-inch wheels. The standard wheels start at 20 inches, but these are optional. You can also see the gorgeous VRS or RS badging here on the side with a glossy black inlay. I also do like the black mirrors and the black frames around the window, and a very clean side paneling for the door, and a very muscular lower side skirt. And finally, yes, this is now the standard Enyaq body shape, not the coupe, so you have a higher roofline here, which affords more space in the boot. We'll talk about that in a minute. The rear profile of the Skoda Enyaq vRS is very similar to the rest of its Skoda siblings. I do like these horizontal tail lamps, very reminiscent of the Skoda Kodiaq as well, and a very neat rear profile. Again, being the VRS, you have a much more athletic looking, almost diffuser-esque style rear bumper. Here's the key fob for the Enyaq RS or VRS. Very typical of the VW family, so nothing special there. But at least you get keyless entry, so you put your hand inside to unlock the door or your palm on the outside to lock it. Let's take a look at the door closing sound. Really robust, no shimmies, no shakes, no rattling. It's a really nice door build quality. And speaking of door quality, Skoda's Simply Clever philosophy means that you get an umbrella here in the side pocket of the door. So how cool is that? You don't need a Rolls Royce to get an umbrella in the door. The materials are also actually pretty good. So up top you have a softer material plastic on the top, microfiber here, carbon fiber effect inlay with ambient lighting. So really nice textures and quality of the material. Of course, down here is harder, but then I think every car in this bracket has the same thing. If we take a look inside, well, again, quite monochromatic. I personally like lighter colors for the roof liner, at least, brings more light inside, but this is very sporty. Again, thanks to that Mamba green color piping and cross stitching on the seats and along the dash, really makes it very, very sporty looking and special. You get two basic design for the interior. You get the standard, which is with this microfiber inserts in the middle of the seat, which I personally prefer, but you can also get a full leather option. Now, getting inside is fairly easy thanks to that high body, but this is a little bit lower than the standard Enyaq, so the ride height is a little bit lower, but getting inside is no problem at all. You have a welcome for the seat, so it moves its way out, which is a pretty standard feature. So, but once you put your foot on the brake, it slides forward, and now I'm in my driving position. I'm 5'8" or about 1.73 meters, and as you can see, I have plenty of headroom, and again, really nice low dashboard, pretty deep dashboard to be honest, again because of this special electric kind of MEB body style. The front of the windshield rakes really forward, so a really deep dashboard, but It really cocoons you in a nice ambience. And again, this nice textured material, this microfiber, this carbon fiber effect with ambient lighting down here really makes this feel very sporty. 3-spoke VRS steering wheel. On the right hand side you have some nice controls for your assistance systems and the screen. I really like this knurled finish on the roller. Really has a nice haptic feedback. Left hand side as well looks similar in the layout. You get steering wheel heating as well as your volume control over here. Behind that you get paddle shifters, and again, this is not for any transmission, of course. This is just for the amount of regenerative braking that you would like to have. And now let's take a look at the instrument cluster, because here at first glance what you see is that, okay, it's really, really small, and if I were to toggle left and right, you see that there's barely any change and there's not much options here at all actually. But I actually don't mind, because it's kind of like the iPhone philosophy. When you first saw that there's no home button, there's no headphone jack, everybody was like, what's happening? But then you realize, what do I really need? And in this case, this is just to give you a quick outlook of the information, but what you really use is their really nice big head-up display as well as the augmented reality navigation. And I would recommend you get that optional augmented reality as well, because with that, you'd never really have to look down here. You have everything covered. You have your assistance systems, the speed, the traffic sign recognition, all of that in the head-up display, which is really vivid and pops, and it's very large. And then you have the augmented reality navigation, which will actually put your directions on the road in front of you, so you don't also have to look at any kind of a map. So in the end, they're kind of streamlining it. Of course, it's also maybe cost cutting, but at the end of the day, you're getting the benefit of this cost cutting, and they're making the use of the systems that make more sense and reducing the systems that you don't really need. And because this is quite small, the instrument cluster is also really low, so you get a better view out forward. There's a really nice large touchscreen here, and this is again what takes center stage, so not really your instrument cluster on the left hand side. And of course this was an issue in the past, but they have got an update which makes the system a lot more slick. There's also always going to be over-the-air connection to get over-the-air updates. And as you can see, it's a lot more slick than it was before. Navigation is definitely much improved, and again I would say at par and better than some systems, but at least not one of the worst systems like it was before. Definitely much nicer now, really detailed. Sometimes it does lag a little bit, but again, you will be looking at your head-up display and your augmented reality, and then you have all of your output or your notifications there. You also get wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so that's really useful. And apart from the touch here, you also have a slider down here to turn the volume up and down, for example. So it's really, it's not the most useful, but at least you have that option. I wish there was always a knob for the volume, because I think it's so much easier to just turn that up and down versus having to use the slider. And what I don't like is the fact that you still have to use these touch parts of the screen for your climate control. There are shortcut buttons down here, but at the end of the day, you still have to operate them up here. So again, we're not really new to these kinds of systems. Further down, air conditioning vents, that carbon fiber effect, trim, ambient lighting, and then down here you do have some shortcut buttons. An interesting choice for these particular shortcut buttons. I would have maybe preferred to have a knob or two instead of all of these buttons here, and maybe the door lock button could have been on the driver's side door, but you have a button here to select your driving mode. So as you can see, you have Eco, Comfort, Normal, Sport, Traction, and then you also have an individual mode, and then you can set different things, like again the DCC, which is an option, but like I said, I would recommend you get the DCC, and you have all these different systems for steering, the drive, adaptive cruise control, even the air conditioning. You can set them up the way you like, and you can make adjustments to the presets as well. And then if we go back here, you see there's also a shortcut to go to the climate, but then with here you still have to go up here and use these touchscreen buttons. So it's a little bit hit and miss, but definitely not something that we're not used to, and it works quite well. Inductive charging over here, a couple beverage holders, and again, because the Skoda Simply Clever, there's these little indentations, so your bottle will stay locked in place and you can open the cap with one hand. And again, down here, the minimalism, the iPhone minimalism that we were talking about earlier, you see there's a very small pebble-like drive selector over here, and of course an electronic parking brake. But if you notice, there's no park on this. And that's because, well, what do you do every day when you're done? You put your car in park and you do the handbrake. There's two different actions, but in reality, if you can club them up into just one, isn't that simpler? So again, at first you're like, why is there no park? But then if you take a minute, you realize, wait, I come to a stop and I press the electronic parking brake, the car automatically goes to park and turns on the brake, and then you actually save time. So I do like these minimalisms here. You also have a couple coin holders, so really practical, yet simple, minimal design. All right, let's take a look at the back. So pretty wide opening, thanks to that longer wheelbase, which means that it's really easy to put your child seats in. It's very easy to identify these anchor points, and also you actually get three. You get the two outside here as well as the front passenger seat, so definitely very practical. The door itself is not as nice as the front door. Also, no umbrella. The materials are a little bit harder throughout and a little bit hollow sounding, but at least you get that microfiber here for the armrest, along with the carbon fiber effect and the ambient lighting. So let's take a seat inside. Again, getting inside is really easy thanks to that still somehow higher ground clearance, but also thanks to this taller body. You also get a sun visor here, so if you want more privacy, or if you have kids in the back who are sleeping and you want to block the sun, you have this nice sunshade. I'm 5'8", like I mentioned, 1.73 meters. This seat is set to my driving position. I have plenty of space for my knees, and you get different sunroof options. You get a standard roof without any glass, which again makes it really dark inside because the roof liner is also dark, the seats are dark. I would recommend you pick at least one of the two sunroofs. This one actually opens the front, which is nice because this will allow some air in as well. But you have a larger panel glass roof which doesn't open and is fixed, but has a more expansive glass top. Up to you guys to decide what you like. However, again, being the MEB platform with the batteries below here, the floor is a little bit higher, and what that means is, you know, with the seat at its lowest position, which is how I like to drive, and even at the lowest position you get a pretty good SUV feeling. There's not so much space to slide my feet under the front. However, good news, nice practicality again for putting some magazines. Who reads magazines these days? iPads, your iPhone, your phone up here. And the VRS also comes as standard with 3 different climate zones. So you get a third climate zone here for the rear passengers with their own vents, heated seats, some USB-C ports as well. In the middle, you have a center armrest with cup holders, which also doubles as a ski hatch. This is the standard SUV, automatic tailgate, not the coupe. So what you see here is 585 liters of trunk space, definitely more than the coupe version. But what's more practical than that is that you have a taller body line, which means that you can probably stack items higher up rather than having to rely on the more lateral space. Really flat loading lip, so you don't have to haul your suitcase over the lip or on the way out as well. Some cubby holes on the side, and you do have switches here to tumble the rear seats, and they do fall fairly flat. There is a little bit of a step up, but in general now you have a lot more space to load your items. And lastly, down there you have some of the charging cables for the Skoda Enyaq. What do we have in the front of the Enyaq? Do you guys call it a frunk or a fruit? I've heard both. Front boot, front trunk, fruit, frunk? I don't know. But anyway, here we go. You have a old-fashioned stick here to prop it open. And as you can see, we have neither. We just have some more gubbins for the electrical system, of course, a place to fill your windshield wiper fluid, which, by the way, I like that this is very easily accessible right here in the front. So let's talk numbers now. So this has an 82 kilowatt hour battery pack. That's gross. And it makes a combined output of 220 kilowatts. That's about 300 PS or metric horsepower. Now remember, this is front wheel drive and rear wheel drive with 2 electric motors, therefore all wheel drive. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour is 6.5 seconds, so it's pretty fast. And the claimed range for all of this is around 500 kilometers. Now, we all know for range, it's really dependent on how you drive, a lot of different conditions with temperature, etc., the terrain of the road you're driving on as well. There's a little bit of a caveat here. Now, the 220 kilowatt max output is only available in certain conditions are met. That is, the battery has more than 88% charge. The temperature of the battery, the ambient temperature, as well as the state of the battery is all taken into consideration. So at the end of the day, that 220 max output, you might not really see that all the time. We'll see if we get that full output or not, and if the power we get on tap in general is still enough for this to be exciting. We'll find out once we start driving. All right, so we're gonna take a drive out in this, well, almost 63,000 euro plus electric hot hatch family SUV. Never thought I'd be saying all those words together at once in a sentence, but here we are. So first impressions, this DCC in its normal mode, which I am in right now. Actually, let's go to comfort mode. On these broken cobblestones here in the Spanish rural countryside and over these speed breakers is actually quite comfortable. So definitely very much usable in a day-to-day situation, especially if you have family or you're going on a road trip. So it can be quite comfortable. You're not sacrificing comfort in the name of sporty dynamics with this DCC. The steering is also quite light. It's got a really nice turn-in, actually. The car rotates and turns in very nicely, even in comfort mode. Sure, because it's light steering wheel in this mode, it's not very, there's not much feedback. I don't get that weight, and communication from the weight of the wheel is lacking, but we can change that very easily by going back into the drive mode selector and then going to Sport. All right, so now the steering gets instantly a lot heavier. Let's go into the B regen mode so that you get a nice braking. And suspension feels stiffer. There's definitely a lot of grip. Wow. Acceleration is good. It's expected from an electric car with 2 electric motors and combined output of, well, hopefully 220 kilowatts or around 300 PS. Remember, it's not available to you at all times, but on wet surfaces, one thing I've noticed, and I've been driving this car off camera yesterday as well, on these beautiful winding roads here near Malaga in Spain. Unfortunately, it's been raining, and on wet, smooth Spanish roads, even if you're not pushing it, it understeers. And that's a little bit of a letdown. And got me thinking, why is that? Maybe because it's the center of gravity, which is really low, and thanks to the heavy battery pack and electric motors low down in the body, when you brake before a corner like right now and turn in, maybe there's not enough load on the front wheels to get that extra grip. And remember, there's also a version with pretty good horsepower, rear wheel drive only. Maybe that version of the Enyaq will be a little bit better handling in terms of lack of understeer. If you're interested in watching us do a comparison with the RS version of the Enyaq, as well as that top-end version, rear-wheel drive only, put it down in the comments below. Thomas and I will try to get that down for you guys. But acceleration is definitely entertaining. It's very confidence-inspiring thanks to that traction that it has with the 4-wheel drive. Really nice turn-in. Even in the sport mode of the suspension, it's definitely not uncomfortable at all. It's very well mannered, very well contained. It holds itself really nicely. Visibility is pretty good too. The windshield is really wide, although, the view out forward is a little bit interesting because it's such a long dashboard, so the roofline is already here. Thankfully, that sunroof affords you some extra light. These seats are also really well contoured, has good side bolstering. This is the microfiber version of the sport seats, and definitely my pick of the two versus the leather, So seats are pretty comfortable, they're wide, a lot of adjustment. I do miss the sound of a nice burbling 4-pot turbo like you usually get in other Skoda VRSs. Well, apart from the Kodiaq where it's actually a diesel. But in general, it definitely feels like a Skoda VRS thanks to that performance and the way it looks on the inside and on the outside. Out on the open road, you also have a bunch of great assistance systems. On the highway as well, you can turn on the Travel Assist, and Volkswagen Group's Travel Assist system has come a long way. It works really well, actually. I'm quite surprised every time I drive it how well it really behaves. It's really sure-footed. It makes good decisions when there's also very faded lanes. When the paint is not so sharp, it still understands in a pretty good way where the road is turning. It's got a good, awareness of its surrounding vehicles. And in fact, with that augmented reality, it kind of highlights cars that might be in your blind spot in the back, or if there's a car that you're coming up close to. And again, coming back to the minimalism of the interior, while some things I don't like the lack of knobs and buttons, which I think is just a safety issue and not a preference, and I hear this a resounding agreement across other journalists and users and people that I talk to. So I think that's a little bit of a miss, but I don't mind this really tiny little instrument cluster because I feel totally comfortable and natural just looking at the head-up display with this great, wide, vivid display and portrayal of all the important information and that augmented reality which just takes over the navigation requirements. So this big screen is great to have, again, because you're a co-passenger and everybody else can also utilize this as a nice way to see the navigation, where you're going, what music is being played, etc., etc. But as a driver, I can just rely on the head-up display and the augmented reality, and it gets the job done just fine. So apart from that, visibility out the side is pretty good. Visibility out the back is also not too bad. This is, again, the SUV body style, so therefore the coupe roofline, you don't make that sacrifice here, so you get a more upright tail, which means that the glass is also more straight, so you get a better view at the end of the day. 360-degree camera, parking assist, all those features are available to also assist you there as well. To be honest, the acceleration and outright performance isn't blistering. Definitely isn't blistering, but it's definitely fun. I'm just thinking, at this price point, over the more top-end version of the standard Enyaq, what extra are you getting for the VRS? And I think the main thing is the looks, which, to be honest, it looks fantastic. I do like this version of the Enyaq vRS compared to the standard version, so definitely a big plus. The interior as well, the seats, except for, like I said, the dark headliner. I know I always rant about that, but it's something that's really important to me personally. But apart from that, this extra performance is not necessarily earth-shattering, something to write home about, but it definitely is more fun, I would say. The brake pedal feel is also really well calibrated because, of course, I have the regen mode on the B mode, where you get a lot of engine braking feel right as soon as you lift off the accelerator pedal. And when you do want to use the brakes, there's a nice gradual linear progression. So you get some feedback, and it's a longer travel, and sure, you don't feel as it would feel if you were using a standard friction brake with a brake pad and a caliper on the rotor, but it definitely feels a lot more confidence inspiring. But yeah, on wet roads, now it's a little bit dry. If you hustle it a little bit too much, it does tend to feel a little bit understeery. These are gorgeous roads here. I love this region of Spain, the southern part of Spain, with these beautiful mountains. Some gorgeous countryside. If you're a driving enthusiast, do come down here with a car or rent a car and drive around. It's a blast. So yes, as always with Skoda, and their VRS, you don't sacrifice any of that practicality. You get the simply clever features which delight you. And with the VRS, you get a little bit more power, but at least you get the VRS philosophy with the design and the ideology of it being more performance oriented, but not necessarily downright extra performance. So sure, we're driving with a very heavy right foot and you can't expect good efficiency with this kind of a driving style, but a long-term 462 kilometer test of this vehicle is showing me 21.4 kilowatt hour for 100 kilometers, which is, I think it's acceptable. Again, there's a huge spectrum of how much efficiency and how much range you can really eke out of these battery electric vehicles. It's really dependent on so many different things. But again, this MEB platform is one that we're very familiar with, and this is a very popular electric car. This is one of the, I think, the 5th highest selling battery electric vehicle in Europe in this year. So that speaks for itself, I think.